There's a comment that reads, when someone asks what religion I am, I'm just going to send them this TikTok, okay? And this was liked by the creator of this video. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome all viewers. Today we're going to be analyzing a viral video. It has over 3 million views on TikTok, and it was posted by a particle physicist named James Beacham. Now today's video is going to be a practical implementation of a lot of the information we presented in a previous video entitled Islam and Philosophy, which was with our brother Abdul Rahman of Knowledge North, where we discussed the intellect, philosophy, and science. So when we talk about the human intellect, this is something that's praiseworthy to use our minds that Allah blessed us with. However, we should also humble ourselves in knowing that the divine revelation that the all-knowing Creator sent us is always going to take precedence over our human limited conjecture. When people leave the divine revelation, they turn their backs on it, they belittle it, while exalting and depending solely on their limited human intellect and conjecture, they inevitably are going to go astray. So it's important to always keep that in mind, because there are many scientists and philosophers who depend solely on their limited intellect and conjecture. In fact, many times they will even scoff at and belittle divine revelation. So that being the case, we should already know as Muslims that foundationally they are going to be astray in many regards. However, nowadays scientists are often treated as if they are these prophetic figures. The truth is, science studies the howness of things. They focus on measuring the physical world. Yet when they excel in this specific field, many of them will also take on the role of being a philosopher, a religious figure where they talk about the whyness of things. They theorize regarding the unseen world, whereas this is a completely different field. They might be knowledgeable regarding science. However, people need to realize that that doesn't mean they know anything about why we exist, that they know anything about the future, that they have any sort of expertise regarding God, Allah, the Creator, or that they have any level of expertise regarding matters of religion. So without further ado, I want us to take a look at this video. In total, it is 3 minutes long, but I broke it into different clips so that we can discuss some of the content. I'd like you to watch this first clip, keeping in mind how he's speaking about a topic that should really cause anxiety. The things that he's saying is actually quite disturbing. And there are a lot of underlying implications. Yet he's saying these things not only calmly, but even in a somewhat humorous fashion. And he's also speaking as if he 100% knows the future. That this information he's sharing, it's 100% factual, rather than based on his own very limited human conjecture that completely neglects divine revelation. So without further ado, let's take a look.
In about 6 billion years, the sun will expand enough to engulf both Mercury and Venus.
They'll be vaporized.
The Earth, however, will probably just barely survive, but will be burned to a crisp.
And will be left as a charred clump of coal to orbit the sun for an extremely long time, during which the sun will change from a red giant into a small white dwarf and then a black dwarf. And our crispy ashen chunk of Earth will slowly orbit closer and closer to the black dwarf sun until 100 million billion years from now, tidal gravitational forces will shred the charred Earth into dust, which will slowly sprinkle toward the tiny, dense, dark sun and be absorbed. And that'll be the end of the Earth, the only home we humans have ever known.
Okay, so that's the first clip I wanted to play. And again, he's speaking very matter-of-factly about things that he doesn't truly know. He doesn't know that Earth is the only home that human beings have ever known. From divine revelation, in fact, we know that Adam and Hawa, the first man and woman, they lived in Jannah before coming to Earth. Also, he doesn't know what's going to happen 6 billion years from now. He might hypothesize regarding certain things within science that they have observed. However, only Allah truly knows the future. And regardless of what happens to the universe that we currently inhabit, we know that we are all going to die, and Allah is going to resurrect us, and there's going to be a day of judgment. There's going to be Jannah and Jahannam. There's going to be paradise and the hellfire. So even speculating regarding the sun and earth 6 billion years from now is quite irrelevant when you know the truth regarding the human condition. However, this plays into the underlying narrative that we are just these particles within the universe, that we are really just insignificant, and that inescapable destruction awaits us. Which, if you just look at the comments, obviously this is going to spark some anxiety. You're talking about death and destruction, the earth burning up. Yet he says all this not only calmly, but even somewhat playfully, which also feeds into the underlying message he's conveying, that it's not something that we really need to be worried about. Well, in actuality, we should be worried about our death. We should be worried about the day of judgment when we have to stand before Allah. And this is an example as to how scientists are actually looked up to as if they are these prophetic figures. Now let's move on to the next clip.
The universe will continue without us, of course, and eventually protons themselves may decay, and all planets, stars, gas, and dust will disintegrate and turn into pure radiation, and black holes will dominate the universe until eventually even the black holes will evaporate. And in the end, in some unfathomably long time, longer than the human mind can comprehend, our universe will likely reach a state of maximum entropy and nearly absolute zero temperature, meaning that literally nothing can ever happen in the universe ever again, and will stay that way, possibly for eternity.
So again, he's not only presenting conjecture as if it is absolute fact, but he's also speculating regarding things that are of no true importance to us. He's talking about what he thinks is going to happen billions and billions and billions and billions of years in the future, which is that the universe will no longer exist. Now, obviously, this is going to naturally evoke a certain reaction from a human being watching this. Now, if you are firmly grounded in divine revelation, you're going to be able to see through what he's saying. You're going to know that he's just some human being, some scientist. He's speculating regarding what he thinks is going to happen billions of years from now. Yet, we already know that every human being is going to die. Allah is going to resurrect us, and we are going to be judged accordingly. Allah is in control of the entire universe. That is what we should be focusing on. However, if you aren't firmly grounded in such truths based on divine revelation, then the message that he's conveying is actually extremely dangerous. He's essentially saying that none of this matters. It's all going to come to an end. There's no mention of God or purpose in life. And you might say, well, yeah, because he's a scientist. Well, this is what's going to bring us to the second half of the video, because he then turns into this religious philosopher. He then starts talking about a purpose in life. And it makes sense that he would do so because in the first half of the video, he's talking about our inevitable destruction. So any human being is going to reflect, well, what's the purpose of all this? What's going to happen? What should we do with our lives? But rather than stay in his lane and stick to science, he then jumps to philosophy, which isn't his field, which isn't why he has the notoriety he has. But this is part of the problem. People will assume because somebody is a scientist that they have excelled in a particular field, that they then must know about all types of other things that actually have nothing to do with science. And this is how many scientists today get away with playing these prophetic roles for people. So now let's move on to the second half of this video where he moves on to his philosophical beliefs.
You will exist for a few dozen years. You may be tempted to conclude that your few dozen years compared to the universe's possibly infinite lifetime are negligible, meaningless, as if the universe doesn't even know you're here. But I like to think of it another way.
So he basically summarizes the first half of the video, that your life is meaningless, you're only going to live for a very, very short amount of time, the whole universe is just going to come to an end anyway. But he says he likes to look at things differently. So let's see how he views things. Rather than look at life completely meaningless based on everything he said so far, what is the purpose of life? Let's see.
You and I are not separate from the universe. You and I are parts of the universe. And when you and I ask questions about the universe, like how did everything begin? What are we made of? How does everything around us work? In a sense, we humans are the method by which the universe asks questions about itself. And you and I are gloriously lucky to be able to be curious about the universe and to study it with science. Others aren't so lucky.
Okay, so we're part of the universe, and we're lucky to be able to ask questions about the universe, and us asking questions about the universe is like the universe asking questions about itself. So you see why it's important to differentiate between science and religiosity, human intellect and conjecture versus divine revelation. Now, from the divine revelation, we know that our purpose in life is to worship our Creator, and we know how to worship Him through the divine revelation He sent. And we know that we are going to be held accountable in the hereafter for how we live in this life, and that there is eternal paradise for those who follow the guidance He sent. However, if you just think that you're just going to cease to exist, you're just particles within the universe, and to try to turn that message into something positive and optimistic, by saying we're lucky to ponder the universe is going to be completely inadequate and unsatisfying for your average person. It's even apparent in this video that he's actually just creating his own meaning for life. This is just how he likes to look at it. Well, what if somebody wants to make their meaning of life doing something completely insane? What's the point of living a righteous life rather than an evil life? And who's to say what's righteous or evil? So all of this just goes to show that not only do many scientists speak about things that they truly have no business speaking about, but it also shows how dangerous what they say can actually be. Yet people will follow them as if they are these prophetic figures, just because they've studied science. So let's move on to the last clip, and you can see here how he really gets kind of preachy and philosophical.
How will I spend my few dozen years in existence? Will I help others who aren't so fortunate to get the resources they need to also be curious about this universe we share, this universe of which we're all a part, this universe in which you and I are collections of particles that are excitations in the exact same quantum fields? In a few billion years, we'll all be equal, indistinguishable particles of cosmic ash, as will all of our cities, monuments, experiments, paintings, books, computers. The question is whether I will use my years to fight to dismantle our human systems that lead to the bigotry, inequity, exploitation, and environmental devastation we're experiencing right now, and to construct better systems in their place, or whether I will sit back and let the people who implement and control these systems continue to prevent my fellow humans from fully experiencing this universe we all share. What will you do?
So that is the end of his video, and you can see he makes one very blatantly false statement that in a few billion years we'll all be equal. The reality is, in the hereafter, we're not all going to be equal. There are those who are going to be successful and enter Jannah, enter eternal paradise. And there are those who are going to be unsuccessful and enter the hellfire. He acts like the purpose of life is to be inquisitive about the universe. And we should help the less fortunate get resources so that they can also be inquisitive about the universe. Even though it's all just going to come to an end and nothing is going to matter. He even says all of the experiments and books and monuments, it's all just going to come to an end. This sort of ideology does appeal to certain people. There's a comment that reads, when someone asks what religion I am, I'm just going to send them this TikTok, okay? And this was liked by the creator of this video. As we also mentioned in the Islam and philosophy episode, there are people who hate the idea of God. So there are comments insulting God. So the point of this video was just to emphasize how scientists today are being treated as these prophetic figures. There's this conflation of being a scientist with being a philosopher. Many people think because somebody might know about science, that they then know about the purpose of life and God and religion. Whereas the reality is they don't. We really need to stop giving scientists more credit than they deserve, and especially for Muslims. We have to be firmly grounded in our religion. We need to know the divine revelation that was sent to us, so we can always use that as the measuring stick by which we understand the universe, we understand this life. And it will help us identify and see through all of these false prophets running around today, preferring their conjecture over the divine revelation, leading people astray because they have some sort of worldly credential that impresses people. And this sort of thing has run rampant in our society, in our schools, our universities. Allah knows best. May Allah keep us firm on the straight path. JazakumAllahukhairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.